What comes first is a clear attitude that children's languages should be in the classroom and they need to be valued.
Hello, my name is Pranav Kothari. I work at Educational Initiatives, and I'm always thinking about how to take our assessments and personalized learning solutions in multiple languages and to scale within the government system in different states. I'm so excited to come to Dhir's home today. I want to ask him about what is it around early learning that is important, that is crucial to focus on so that a child has developed comprehension skills in multiple languages. I'm going to ask him as to what are the elements that I should focus on when thinking about contextualizing and translating our English versions to multiple regional languages. Given that Dhir is an IS officer and was a principal secretary as well as worked in the Ministry of Education, I'm going to ask him as to what are the critical factors that one needs to accomplish before one thinks about scaling. Dhir also started an organization, is an entrepreneur that now has 26 employees. And I'm going to ask him, how was it to start from the ground floor after achieving almost the top floor position in the administrative services? Thank you so much, Dhir, for giving your time. I'm very excited about our conversation today. Dhir, you've been at the highest levels of the government as an IS officer, at principal secretary, at the MHRD. Was it difficult to start an organization from ground zero with nobody that you can give an order to?
Yes and no. I basically left the government not because I was frustrated with the government. I think I had a great time working with the district primary education program, the Sarva, Shiksha, Abhiyan, and a lot of policies in elementary education. But I was too attached to the education sector. In fact, quite passionate about it. So as you grow senior in the government, you've got to go to different sectors, coal and mining and agriculture. So I just said I've got to devote all my time to education. So I think that was the pull factor. And since that was very strong, whatever was required to be doing something outside the government, I was quite ready for it. So initially, yes, it was you starting small. We started off with just one employee in 2015. I was there without a salary. We used to work out of our home here. We now have about 26. So we've grown, but I think what's very important is the culture of the organization, which we try to preserve while still trying to scale up. So we do think that a rights orientation, a focus on equity is very important, ensuring that whoever comes in has a learning nature. The organization itself learns from its experiences and others. So we are growing, but we are trying to be very cautious and see that we preserve what we stand for and we have high quality interventions. I've got over the initial part of not being with the government anymore, and I think in a way it offers a lot of opportunities across different states. You get to meet so many people in very different situations. And think of how the work can be contextualized in very different situations. And I think the biggest reward is when people say they really liked our courses, a 9-month intensive course, and when someone comes back and said that I really liked it, I'm going to ask 4 more people to do it, that is really satisfying.
A lot of our work takes us to remote parts of Rajasthan. When I visit some of the homes, I find that the child is expected to speak in the tribal language of the home. But when the child goes out to the market, has to transact in a Marwadi language, with the shopkeepers. The same child is going to the school and learning in a Hindi medium school. And the parents are telling me, "Kash, mera bacha English padh sakta." If you were the principal secretary of that state in education, how would you think about solving this issue?
I've looked at this issue in depth. And I think it's a very big challenge. At one point, I estimated that about 25 to 30% of children in India actually face a moderate to severe disadvantage because of their language, the home language being very different from the school language. The additional complicated factor here is this, that the home language of children usually is considered inferior or substandard and not adequate enough to be used in a formal domain like the school. So that's a big challenge about beliefs and attitudes about these languages. What I think is a good starting point for addressing this, and I think this is a mantra for me, is to include children's languages in the classroom in different ways. One great way is to start a lot of oral language work in children's languages, help them understand the equivalence between those languages and, let's say, Hindi, if that's the medium of instruction. This is very crucial because we know very well that a strong foundation in one language helps a great deal in learning other additional languages.
Okay.
And secondly, if we believe that in education, higher order comprehension, thinking and reasoning is very crucial, then there's no way but to use a familiar language, because no
Right.
child can actually do all this in a language she barely understands. So for me, the starting point is a clear position that children's languages should find place in the classroom, and this then can translate itself into flexible policies and strategies depending on situations, because as you said, linguistic situations in India are very complex. So a flexible policy that enables the use of children's languages and good strategies to help children then learn Hindi and English is something that we should definitely do very quickly.
Easier said than done, right? In a city like Delhi, you have immigrants coming from all over India and settling here. Their children are going to the school, and there are probably at any given point 10 different languages at play. Do you really expect the teacher to be able to cater to this diversity, cater to each of the language, when he or she may only know a couple of them?
Right. It is a very challenging situation, not just in urban areas, but any area where there are migrants and children from different language backgrounds. As I said earlier, I think the most important point is to develop what's been called a multilingual habitus, an attitude of tolerance towards diversity in language and culture, and especially towards non-dominant languages and cultures. So this is a big issue as far as attitudes are concerned. Strategies about how to do it actually can follow if we can instill this kind of understanding that children's languages are important, they should be valued in the classroom. Children use their languages for whatever purpose they need to, and when they have to use the school language, then obviously the teacher must understand that if they make errors, that's a part of the learning process, and they would gradually pick up more of that language. So a lot of space is given to use of their own languages, and of course many methods which can be used where the teacher or other children translate what other children are seeing. A conversation can be held. We've seen in Chhattisgarh where in a classroom there are children who speak Sambalpuri, Chhattisgarhi, Hindi, Gondi. A teacher, a good sensitive teacher, is able to hold a conversation with them through a lot of gestures, pictures and supportive actions, and children actually participate. And when the teacher actually speaks Hindi, he actually makes it accessible for children by these scaffolds that they use. And slowly children pick up what is the equivalence in different languages, especially the target language, which is Hindi. So I can say that it's not easy, definitely, but what comes first is a clear attitude that children's languages should be in the classroom and they need to be valued.
A good, sensitive, dedicated, effective teacher, like having that attitude, is an incredibly short supply. What are you doing towards increasing the capacity in the system?
I think that's the impression that most of us carry. My experience in the past 3.5 years has been really a pleasant surprise. We've been running courses of long durations. These are blended courses which have a distance learning component as well as phone calls, mentorship, etc. And we've had about 800 teachers sign up for these courses, fairly rigorous courses, and there's been a huge demand for it. So we've discovered that there is a large number of teachers who actually want to learn and want to change things. Our estimate from the 5 states we work in could be about 25 to 30%. What is needed is an ecosystem that is supportive of their desire to learn and change, and an encouragement for that kind of transformation. And I firmly believe that at some point this number would increase from a large number of efforts, not just ours, and be like a tipping point where the norm then becomes where a teacher is supporting active learning in a classroom with a lot of children's participation. So I'm quite optimistic.
Let's say I'm a teacher and I am faced with this class which has a multitude of languages. I have the right attitude that I want to engage in conversations with these children. What are some easy things I can do to quickly embark on this journey?
Yeah, so I think yes, while I said that attitude is the most important, but I think it's important also to understand what strategies can work in different situations, and situations can be quite diverse. So with young children, when they come in with very little understanding of the school language, you've got to work with strategies that help to scaffold their understanding of the school language, because you're not going to use many languages. While you encourage children to be using their languages, the teacher probably is constrained to be using 1 or 2 or 3. One strategy, for example, is called total physical response, where through a lot of gestures and rhymes, the teacher tries and build in among children a basic vocabulary of about 200 words quite soon through a lot of interesting activities, singing and action songs, and which children love. And then those 200 words, which could be nouns and verbs, actually form the basis for children to then be trying to understand if there's a read aloud session that the teacher does, in Hindi, let's say. The children are from a different language background. So given the support of the picture in the book, several nouns and verbs the child has already picked up, the teacher then supporting with very simple questions to check for understanding is a good way to start off. Teachers can also use strategies like translating or using children's help to translate, especially elder children. Also allowing what is called translanguaging, which is allowing children to use and themselves using a language which uses their best linguistic resources, whatever children know at that time, which could be a mix of different languages. So encouraging children to express fluently in whatever language or mixture of languages they can, because what is most important is children's expression. That gives them confidence. Language learning is all about getting an environment to listen to language and to be able to produce language. So how do you provide the environment for children to produce language without saying it can be only in language X, and encouraging children who may be using a mix of language and seeing that this is a part of the learning process, and slowly they'll move towards greater use of the so-called target language. So strategies like this are very useful.
When I look at countries like Japan, perhaps even China, the economics of being proficient in the language, Japanese, and the disadvantage of not being proficient in English, the difference is very little, right? Because there are enough jobs out there in Japan where even if you knew only Japanese and didn't know a word of English, you are not economically disadvantaged. But in a country like India, where if you are not sort of proficient in English or even Hindi, and only proficient in Wagri, there aren't enough economic opportunities available. Right? So from a market demand perspective, it's very difficult to make a case to have more books in Wagri, to be able to have more material in Wagri, to be able to teach that in early childhood, because the economic pressure isn't there, unlike a country like Japan.
So I never argue that children should continue to read and work only through Wagri. One of the ways of looking at this is that a strong foundation in one language helps you learn the other languages much better. Again, there's so much research around it. So we are completely clear that children have to learn very good Hindi in terms of oral expression, in terms of being able to read with comprehension and even write. I think the case of English is overstated. As I go around these states, I find that the language they need to know very well in terms of reading and writing is actually Hindi. We work in Hindi speaking states right now. Oral English, yes. But we've sort of gone overboard in starting with literacy for English in grade 1. So I don't have a case to say that Vagadi should be the medium of instruction for all of school education. To ensure that a child, when she comes into school, doesn't face a complete sort of incomprehension and is able to work in a language that she understands best, develop her comprehension skills, inferential skills, and we introduce other languages appropriately. English, for example, we should introduce from the beginning, from grade 1, but oral English, informal oral English, communicative English. The problem there is that our teachers actually don't, many teachers are not able to converse in English, so they resort to teaching A for apple. So I think languages can coexist, and for a child, learning 2 or more languages at the same time is definitely possible. There's no harm in it. We need not focus on literacies, multiple literacies from the beginning. That's the stand I take. So we should focus a lot on developing oral and speaking English skills from the beginning.
So there we've talked about a particular geography. We talked about a narrow strand of how multilingual literacy. What are some best practices? How do we take this to scale?
Right. So let me take this question in a slightly broader perspective of how do you take any kind of transformative change that you want to do to scale, right?
Yes.
And I'll draw upon my experience of working with Sarva, Shiksha, Abhiyan and the Room to Read, and now in the Language and Learning Foundation. I think the first most important ingredient is a shared vision that must be shared by all those in the system and not just people at the top. It should be something which is very clearly articulated. The understanding of that vision and what needs to be done is the same at, let's say, the level of secretary and the teacher. So a shared vision is very important. Ideally, this shared vision should be developed through consultation and dialogue, rather than just someone deciding, and what reaches the teacher is a prescriptive package of how to do things. So the second important ingredient of trying to scale a good intervention is to have champions of that transformative change. These can be people from within the system or outside, and they should be not just convinced about that change, but actually live that change to be able to convince others about that change. Related to this is having a number of demonstration sites where this change can actually be implemented for people to go and see. A live site where you can see change is very convincing. Third important ingredient of taking a good program to scale is to have a kind of informal agreement or compact between all the stakeholders. I've seen this work where, let's say, at a school or a panchayat level, teachers, the head teacher, the education department, the panchayat people, a local religious leader, for example, all of them come together and maybe even sign an agreement to say that this is what we are going to do, this is our objective, and it's shared amongst all. So I call that like a compact between stakeholders. The fourth ingredient, which is very crucial, is to involve institutions, because especially for people who are working in non-government organizations, we go and do our thing, and after that, after a few years, it's not there. So it's very important to be involving institutions within the education system, like the diets or BRCs or CRCs. So I would place these four as the most important ingredients to be taking anything to scale.
How are you thinking about scale? What does scale mean for Language and Learning Foundation, and when will you scale?
Yeah. So I believe in hastening slowly. So I come from a background where scale is important. I've been in the government for close to 25 years. So scale is very crucial. But it has to be with quality, at least preserving the most essential aspects of that change. So it's very important to ensure that you create that ecosystem where change can survive, sustain and thrive. So what we do, for example, I think what we do is not still small. I mean, if we do about 1,000 teachers who undergo rigorous courses, it's still some kind of scale. I mean, for a state like UP with 400 teachers, it's nothing. That's true. So I would think that it's important to begin an intervention with a scale where you can preserve very high quality, simultaneously work through and with the entire system. Very often what we do is that we work just with teachers, while people in the system like block and district education officers and others actually have a very different understanding. So while this work at a limited scale is happening, ensuring that there is an understanding within the system of what that transformative change can look like, a shared vision, as I said. And then the next step, one could be more ambitious in what kind of scale we achieve. And I said, in that process, creating champions who can then take it forward. For example, in Chhattisgarh, there are about 80 people who did our 9-month course, or I said a rigorous course on language education. 20 of them are now mentors for 200 cluster academic coordinators. So they are in a way the champions I spoke about, because they have internalized it, they're doing things in their school and they feel that they have to spread this. It's something which is very important. So now we are ready, say in Chhattisgarh, with these 20 people to go to 800 or 1,000 or 2,000. That's our plan. So it's very important to follow these steps and ensure that the system understands what is to be changed. There are champions, and then you scale it in a manner where quality is monitored and controlled.
What is the best insurance product one can buy that when scaling, quality doesn't suffer?
The biggest insurance for ensuring that change sustains is that those responsible for bringing about change have to be involved at every stage, and what they say must be heard. You must reflect and redesign and then practice again. So a praxis model is what is most useful. And then of course a lot of monitoring and quality control.
Dhir, do you think technology can help achieve some of these goals that you have outlined?
I think today all of us are talking about technology. And it's very important to see how technology and good teaching learning processes come together. Right now in many states, technology is being looked at as an add-on, like just do a smart class, do a class where all children come in at that point. But ensuring that the principles of how children are actively engaged, which is what happens when you have a good video, for example, permeates into regular teaching learning process. And how do you integrate these to provide a good active learning environment to children? I firmly believe that in the early years of school, the most important interaction is between a teacher and a child. I mean, Vygotsky has said this very clearly, that it's the interaction, the cooperative learning, whether it's the teacher or the child or the child and child, that's the most important part of language learning. So I think it's very important to ensure that there is a good language learning environment in the classroom that the teacher creates through a lot of read-alouds, a print-rich environment, conversations, interaction, etc. But I think it's very important, especially in the situations you described, where the teacher may not know some of the languages and there is good content available for children to look at or listen to in some of these languages. I'm assuming the teacher actually knows the language which is the target language. So that could be very helpful, and also for assessments, for example, to be able to provide feedback like MindSpark does, provide feedback on where children are and what should be the course of action for either individual children or groups. So I think in these components it's important. Yeah.
So Dhir, are there any interesting and important problems to solve in the education sector?
Several. And I think we need a lot of new people trying to look at these problems from a fresh point of view. To give you a few examples, I would say, how do we introduce thinking, reasoning, creativity, communication, collaboration, what we commonly call 21st century skills, not just in the curriculum, but how does it happen in the classrooms with the teachers that we have? Another thing that I always think about is about 30% of our enrollment is in affordable private schools. And these schools typically are not in a position to invest in improving the quality of education. Their concern is really about admissions and getting revenues. So how do we ensure that they're able to get more resources and they look at quality as an important area of work? If we look at people who are interested in a systems approach and governance, the government sector is a great place to work in and try and look at how at different levels where people may have different objectives, different ways of working, how does all of that come together synergistically when a big intervention is planned, and how do outcomes actually come together? Of course, in terms of other areas, I would say foundational learning, which is the area that I work in. Multilingual education we've discussed is a huge area where new approaches and people who can do research and actually start programs is very, very important. Also in terms of how do you work with early mathematics, for example. So these are all very important areas to build good foundational learning.
Great, Dhir. Thank you so much for sharing 3 decades worth of insight on how to take something to scale, when is it prime for scale, for elucidating so much about multilingual literacy, and for also sort of showcasing about how singular focus on education can drive someone to perhaps leave out the luxuries of a senior administrative officer to pursue a singular vision. It was really great, and thanks for being such a great host to do this at your home.
Thanks, Pranav. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.